You know how I keep saying that the religious are children? Well, here comes a video that will prove it to you. Because there is something severely wrong with these people, and now we have an actual doctor spelling it out for us. This ought to be fun. Let's go take a look. Here's a weird one for you. Over on PragerU, that hive of utter irrationality, they have a video from a psychiatrist, and he has 5 points to make about maturity, none of which the religious score very well on. It's almost like whoever okayed this video for the channel, they didn't stop to consider its ramifications. That's pretty typical for Prager, as it's becoming clear, but I'm going to point out how every single one of these points reflects very badly on the religious. So, let's get started.
We all know it takes a long time to grow up, not only biologically but psychologically. There's a saying among psychiatrists that it takes 50 years to overcome the first 20. Here's the good news. Unlike other species, we are not restrained by our instincts alone.
And that is both good and bad. It would be a whole lot easier if we didn't have to think, if everything that went through your head was pre-programmed and you knew it worked. In fact, having the ability to think and reason beyond the instinct actually makes things a whole lot harder, and that's why we have a lot of problems if you think about it. You don't see animals screwing each other over for a percentage, as George Carlin once said. So our ability to think is both a blessing and a curse. It's when people have the ability to think and choose not to that you get the biggest problems, and that's usually the case in PragerU videos, if you notice. I'm going to use this video, as I have in the past, to prove just how dumb religion is by using their own videos against them. So, here we go.
We are able to learn from our parents, our experiences, and our culture.
And that's not always a good thing, as I said, because a lot of the things that we learn from our parents, our experiences, and our culture, they are often simply wrong. They allow us to take bad ideas and internalize them, and this colors our ability to think rationally about the real world. That, whether anyone likes it or not, is a problem. Just because your parents, say, force irrational, idiotic religious beliefs into your head at a time when you are not capable of intellectually evaluating them, that can harm your ability to think critically about the world around you for the rest of your life. Your culture is not always right, whether you like that or not. Your experiences are viewed through the lens of your beliefs, whether your beliefs are true or not. It really isn't a very efficient system when you stop to think about it.
Here's the bad news. Nobody matures without effort. It doesn't happen naturally. It takes a lot of hard work.
And I think that's something that we all see every single day in the real world. I'd say that most people never mature. They never grow up. A lot of that is set up early on, and if you don't get that foundational grounding in critical thinking, it will be a lot harder to overcome it later on. This is exactly why the religious rely on childhood indoctrination. If they can get that mind poison implanted early enough, then it's incredibly difficult to escape. It's why you see people wasting their entire lives on this childish nonsense. They missed out on the early opportunity to grow the hell up.
But what does it mean to be mature? Good question. So let's answer it. I have identified 5 characteristics of maturity. If you work to possess them all, you will have a happier, deeper, and more productive life.
And I'm going to apply each and every one of them to religious faith. Now, keep in mind, they're not only applicable to religious faith, and where I see other applications, I may point that out. But this is a channel mostly dedicated to debunking religious stupidity, and therefore, that's where we're going to look first. It's why, if you really sit down and look at a lot of psychiatrists and psychologists, even the religious ones, the things they say about healthy psychology, if you apply it to religion, none of it actually works out well for the faithful, does it? Because religion is inherently a problem whether anyone is willing to admit it or not. So continue on, Doctor. Give us those 5 characteristics of maturity that the religious will invariably not possess.
1. Taking control.
And that's one the religious simply don't want, because their entire theology is about giving up control. Let go, let God. You can't do anything on your own. It all takes your imaginary friend in the sky. You know, that thing that you can't prove is actually real. It's easier to remain a child than it is to grow the hell up, but when it comes to religion, giving up childish things like having imaginary friends, that's too hard, so the religious refuse to let go. The real world might be a scary place sometimes, but so what? It's still real, and you still have to grow up and deal with it. Unless you're religious, then you get to stay in a state of perpetual childish bliss and make life hell for everyone else. Yeah, that's not how it works.
Of course, you had no choice what era you were born in, or where you were born, or who your parents are. But with each year of childhood, you attain more and more capacity to chart your own course. Yes, society and fate play a role, but cultivating your ability and willingness to make your own decisions expands your ability to influence how your life unfolds.
And you notice how little the religious want to do that, right? They're too busy asking their imaginary friend what they should do. What is your calling? What does God want you to do with your life? These are all questions that are very, very, very common among the religious, because they don't want to be in charge of anything. They want to be led around by the nose and told what to do because it's easier than having to think for themselves. And the more religious they are, the worse it becomes. These are not smart people. These are not mature people. And unfortunately, they are not alone. This is something that I see to an absurd degree today, especially on social media. People who can't make any decision of any kind on their own. What TV shows should I watch? What clothes should I wear? What action should I take? These people try to leave everything up to strangers online. Why? Because they're too immature to make any decisions on their own. People need to grow the hell up and learn how to make their own choices. It's sad to see how many people are utterly incapable of it.
The only way to achieve maturity is to take charge of your life. Nothing empowers you as much as exercising that control.
Exercising that control rationally. Just making bad decisions because you have the ability to make bad decisions, that's really not a good idea. And we see a lot of that too. Actions inherently have consequences, and it's being able to balance what you want to do against what is best to do that makes you an intelligent, rational, and mature adult. But nobody wants to do that, right? It's easier to go down the simple path and trip over every stupid obstacle in your way. If you are never held accountable for your choices, as unfortunately in modern society a lot of people aren't, then why not do stupid things and win stupid prizes? There's really no downside. All you have to do is convince people to feel bad for you, and they'll even make excuses for why you fail. No, you fail because you fucked up. It's time to come to grips with reality. Grow up and deal with it.
Refusing to act, waiting to be rescued, and seeing yourself as a victim are sure signs of immaturity.
Yet, isn't that exactly what the religious do? They're helpless sinners. They can't help but do wrong. They just need to beg for forgiveness and suddenly everything is fine. It's not their fault. Except it is. It always is. And this is where bald rationalization becomes such a problem, because they are looking for excuses why doing the stupid thing is actually okay. So long as they can come up with a reason why faith is fine, nothing else matters, right? Except, it does.
2. Taking responsibility.
And this is a huge one, and one that the religious are absolutely incapable of. Now, the reason for this is primarily emotional. They'd rather feel good than be factually correct. It's all about the feels and never about the reals. They just don't care, and that is entirely irrational and immature. Now, in the modern world, that's not at all uncommon, unfortunately. Lots of people behave that way, whether they have imaginary friends or not. And as I said, because we tend not to hold these people accountable for their decisions, and we tend to remove all consequences for bad decisions, nobody ever learns a lesson. Why should they? Someone will always come along and save them from their own stupidity, after all. It's not your fault, it's your lifestyle, it's your culture. There's always an excuse for doing the wrong thing. Except that's not how any of it actually works. Pretending that it does, that just harms us all.
I mean this in 2 ways. The first way is simply to acknowledge that you're responsible for what you do. If you make a mistake, acknowledge it. Don't alibi and don't blame others.
Like the religious do all the time. Because nothing is ever their fault, is it? They're just miserable sinners after all, incapable of doing the right thing, and therefore nothing is really their fault. Oh, they're good at throwing in a dose of self-depreciation and feigning sorrow, but they really don't mean it, do they? Because if you do wrong and you take responsibility for it, you change. And they don't change, do they? Most people don't. It's why prison recidivism is so high. They're not learning anything. They're not sorry. Well, they're sorry they got caught, but that's about it. Their experiences never teach them anything new, because doing the right thing is hard, and who has time for that?
This is an easy thing to say, but we all know it's very hard to do. A mature person does it. A mature person takes responsibility.
And that's why there aren't a lot of mature people out there. Everyone makes mistakes. We all do it. Let's be honest. You need to take responsibility for it when you do. Fix the mistake as best you can. Make amends to those who have been harmed by your actions. Grow up and don't do it again. Learn your lessons. Be a better person. But nobody wants to learn anything, especially the religious, if you notice. Have a debate with a theist, and they will leave the debate the exact same way they came into it. It doesn't matter how much their beliefs have been proven irrational and false, because they don't care. It's not important. They don't change their minds, and they don't even remember being proven wrong. Because who cares about being right, right? It's really pathetic when you think about it.
Second is the willingness to take on obligations and fulfill them. For example, I got married and took on obligations to my wife and children. I have ethical obligations to my patients and my profession, even on days that I might not feel like it.
Yeah, trust me, that's a big one. I've seen that a lot. Oh, I don't want to come into work today. It's a nice day and I'd rather go to the beach. Yeah, sorry, fuck you, get your ass to work. But no, lots of people think their own immediate happiness overrides their obligations to others. It's why we see so many people getting divorced, especially among the religious, if you notice. I'm not happy. Yeah, fuck you. Shut up and deal with it, you immature child. Nobody has to make you happy 24/7. You've got responsibilities. Deal with it. But lots of people don't want to, which is why they retreat into an emotional happy land like the religious do. Because life is hard. Well, too fucking bad.
A mature person doesn't see obligations as burdens, but as something he willingly accepts and sees through to fulfillment.
And this is something else that I see constantly. Deal with it, people. What the hell is wrong with you? George Carlin had a whole bit about, I'm not happy. Well, shut the fuck up. Life is not all about you. It never has been, and it never will be. Sure, when you're little, people treat you like you're important, like you matter, like the whole world somehow revolves around you. And they're wrong because it doesn't. You don't actually mean a damn thing in the grand scheme of things. It's why so many people want to remain emotional children. It's a whole lot easier than just growing up. Live in your mother's basement until you're 40. Who cares? Never get a job. Who cares? Believe absurd things for emotional reasons. What difference does it make? Because it's a whole lot easier than just being an adult.
3. Containing emotions.
That's a big one, isn't it? And when it comes to the religious, they simply can't manage it. These people are just balls of emotion and virtually nothing else. But my feelings. Yeah, fuck your feelings. That's for you, not everyone else. But as a culture becomes more self-centered, everyone starts to think that it's all about them. That's why you get people sharing pictures of their food. Because, of course, everyone else cares what you stuff into your pie hole. It's why people online share pictures of absolutely everything they do. Because the world is constantly in awe of their activities. But here's a secret for you, Snowflake. Nobody gives a shit. Nobody. And this is especially true of the religious, if you notice. I'll go with yet another line from Carlin. Anyone who mentions Jesus more than 300 times in a 2-minute conversation, that person has problems. Why? Because they think you're immensely interested in what's going on in their head. And we're not. Nobody cares. It's not about you, but you're too immature to figure that out. Grow the hell up.
I would never suggest that you should ignore your emotions, but you have to learn to contain them. Immature people lash out at their boss or their coworker if something doesn't go their way, or argue with their spouse when they come home, or turn to alcohol or drugs because of a rough day.
Or fly airplanes into buildings because they think their imaginary friend has been slighted. Because we see this all the time, don't we? Violence done in the name of religion because these people are incapable of stepping back and evaluating their positions rationally. Then they tend to lash out for entirely irrational reasons. I'm sorry. I don't care how much you believe in your imaginary friend. That doesn't give you an excuse for throwing gay people off of roofs, blowing up abortion clinics, or hacking up atheists with machetes. Yet, these are all very, very common among the religious, if you notice. Most people don't do it, granted, and that's great, but you don't see an awful lot of cases of atheists bludgeoning the religious to death for being obnoxious about it. That's not to say there aren't atheists with maturity problems. There are, but I don't see it nearly as much as I do among the religious. Wonder why?
I often tell my patients that maturity can be measured by how much anxiety they can tolerate without acting out inappropriately against themselves or others.
Yeah, that's a problem, isn't it? Because violence is almost never the answer, unless you look at religiosity and find that quite often it is the answer in their minds. I mean, just go look in a religious subreddit or a forum sometime, and you will find a lot of them talking about who they want to kill in God's name. This is more prevalent in some religions than others, but it's still out there. And it's not just them, as we can see with the recent violence and rioting across America. These are children throwing temper tantrums because they aren't getting their way. They've got their justifications for it all, just like the religious do, but they're doing exactly the same thing in the end. Because these people have serious maturity problems. It's time for all of them, every last one, to fuck the hell right off and try growing up.
Mature people express their emotions in the right place, at the right time, in the right way. We are emotional beings, but we should never let go of the steering wheel. That is, we need to learn how and when to contain our emotions.
And far too many people cannot, if you notice. It's fine to be emotional when it is appropriate. But lots of people just don't understand how that works. We see lots of people throwing temper tantrums these days, and it's just stupid. I've shown them in videos before, so I'm not going to do it again, but we all know that it's out there. There is never an appropriate time for an adult to get on the ground and kick and scream and cry like a 2-year-old. Never. Not once. Yet, you can find hundreds of examples on YouTube right now. This is a fundamental problem that we're seeing, and it's not just the young and left of center. It's a lot of people, even the religious. Go watch a Steven Anderson video sometime. That's mostly what he does. Hell, go watch The Atheist Experience or Talk Heathen, and you'll see it virtually every show. Some religious fucktard calling in and screaming and making impotent threats because their fifis are hurt. It really is asinine.
4. Having perspective. An immature teenager will regard a pimple as a catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius, or will regard rejection by a girlfriend or boyfriend as the end of the world. Maturity comes from putting disappointments into perspective.
And that's something that the religious are unable to do. Now, some are certainly worse than others, and I wouldn't say that all are equally bad, but we know that there are a lot of theists who simply cannot understand perspective, and worse, I think, a lot who simply cannot place their own religious beliefs in perspective against reality itself. Because that's where a lot of problems come in. Remember, theists often think that we are just like they are because they can't imagine anyone not being just like they are. They really don't understand that what goes on in their heads isn't the same thing that happens for everyone. So we all have faith. We all believe in a God or disbelieve in a God, as the case may be, but we're all doing just what they're doing, and they're just wrong. The complete lack of perspective these days is a major problem. Our views are the only correct views, whether we can prove it or not. So we get to go out and destroy things that we don't like because everyone must inherently agree. And if they don't, then they're automatically wrong because they don't agree with you. Childishness is rampant.
The reason we forgive a teenager's overreaction is because we understand it's probably the first time it's happened. But life's disappointments don't stop when you turn 21, far from it. Disappointments of every variety, great and small, happen throughout life. The mature person learns from them and gets stronger each time he recovers. This kind of mature thinking is best expressed in the famous advice given to King Solomon, "This too shall pass."
Assuming that ever happened. That's not all that relevant, I suppose, but it points to the absurd assumption that everything in the Bible must be true because it makes them feel good to think that it is. This is exactly why religious arguments never go anywhere, because you have one side that has supreme confidence that they're right, even though they have no rational evidence that they are, and the other side that's kind of snickering and going, "You people are idiots." But for the religious, they can't be wrong because their feelings insist that's the case. People just need to get over themselves. It's not all about you. It never has been, and it never will be. You need to be able to step back and deal with the reality that we all live in as it actually is, and not as you desperately wish that it was. And most people, sadly, can't do that.
Perspective also means that when we are upset with someone dear to us, we have to put that negative experience in the context of the entire relationship. Immature people demonize a friend or a relative they are upset with and forget or ignore all the love and good experiences they once had.
Which makes it kind of funny that PragerU, which is typically very pro-religious, especially pro-Christianity, ignores the time-honored tradition of shunning and throwing your family members out of the house and out of your lives when they do something you don't like. My child is gay? Toss them out into the street. Well, that's kind of dumb, isn't it? Of course it is, but these people are incapable of having an intelligent thought when their religious beliefs get in the way. Because religion is dumb. It just is. These people can't listen to anything that goes against their mentally poisoned beliefs. Talk about being unable to put things in perspective.
Mature people see the whole picture, not only the good and not only the bad.
But mature people aren't behaving like little children like most religious people are. Of course, it isn't just the religious with the problem. There's a real feel these days that everything is doom and gloom and the end of everything is near. You know, like some religious cults. But if you go into a lot of college classrooms today, all you hear about is the bad. Everything is terrible, just like the song says.
Everything is awful. Everything is bad, total catastrophe. Everything is awful. Here in 2020, it all sucks.
Quarantine, no vaccine, no sports and no vacationing. What a mess. Murder hornets, no parties for graduates. Things, news, life, it's awful. Health, wealth, myself, it's awful. Folks, humans, people, they're awful. Everyone and everything I see is awful.
Everything is awful. Everything is bad, it's a calamity. Everything is awful. Here in 2020.
5. Achieving deep understanding. This takes the concept of empathy to a higher level. Beyond tuning into another's feelings, this is about comprehending the ways in which another's ideas and behaviors make sense to them.
Yes and no, because really, it isn't about something making sense to someone else. It's about whether or not they make sense, period. Because ultimately, I don't care what deluded thoughts are in your head. I don't care if it makes you happy. I care if it's objectively true, and for many people, what they think and believe simply isn't. And this goes back to one of his other points about controlling your emotions. Your emotions really don't matter, not objectively anyhow. It doesn't matter how something makes you feel if it isn't true. You don't have an excuse to just believe shit because you like it. Bad ideas are bad ideas no matter how it makes you feel. And that's important to remember. You have to be in control of your emotions. You cannot allow your emotions to be in control of you. Give it a shot.
You don't have to agree with that person, but you need to be able to get inside their thinking. You need to understand why they believe what they believe.
And I do. I just don't think it's worth believing, not for me and not for anyone else either. And this is something that a lot of people need to recognize. I don't believe anything because it makes me feel good. I constantly test all of my positions against objective reality to see if they stand up to critical scrutiny. If it doesn't, it goes away. It doesn't matter how much it might personally appeal to me. If it isn't true, it isn't worth believing. And that's true of everyone, whether they like it or not.
A good way to do this is to repeat what a person has said back to them. Is this what you meant? If they say, yes, it is, then you know, and they know, that you've reached a deeper understanding.
Which has nothing at all to do with whether or not the idea is worthwhile. I can ask a neo-Nazi what they mean by killing all non-whites. That doesn't make the idea worth holding, no matter what they say in response. I can ask a Muslim why they think all gay people should die. It's still stupid, no matter how they respond. And this is exactly why I say that I don't care what you believe. I care what you can prove. Your beliefs have to be valid, not just emotionally comforting. I don't care how they make you feel. I care if you can provide objectively verifiable evidence that what you believe is actually true. And for most of the people I've talked about in this video, they simply can't.
This kind of understanding, by the way, is indispensable to achieving true intimacy. It explains why the mature person is able to have more intimate relationships than the immature person ever will.
And that's why mature people tend to stay married for a long, long, long time. Because they're able to take all of those points and apply them to their lives. Just saying.
Taking control, taking responsibility, containing your emotions, having perspective, achieving deep understanding. These are 5 characteristics of maturity. Together they can lead you to a deeper and happier life.
And without them, you're just going to be an immature child living in the body of an adult. Adulthood doesn't magically come when you reach a certain chronological age. It comes when you actually manage to grow the hell up. I really wish there was a way that we could measure and quantify that and only grant people adult status when they actually reach it. But I fear we'd have a society with 10 adults and millions and millions and millions of children. And that would be even more sad, wouldn't it?
I'm Dr. Stephen Marmer, psychiatrist, UCLA School of Medicine for Prager University.
And why did you make this video for them when clearly most things Dennis Prager and his band of idiots believe, they don't work under any of your 5 rules? It's the same question I had for Ricky Gervais back when I did his video. Because while I agree that not everything on PragerU is raging ass cancer, most of it absolutely is, and most of it is entirely irrational and immature. It's really why I decided to take this video on, because the good doctor makes some good points, but for the entirely wrong audience. The people subscribed to PragerU aren't going to be able to appropriately apply to the 5 points to anything they already believe, and that's kind of sad when you think about it, because those are the people who need the help the most. The overly emotional, intellectual midgets who believe for bad reasons and reject all concepts to the contrary out of hand. Those are the people who desperately need to see the reality of what they believe, and those are the ones who never will because they just don't care. Now, I don't know what the doctor's beliefs are, and it really doesn't matter. But this is yet another one of those situations where you watch the video and think, they're so close, only to see the whole thing collapse like a house of cards at the very end. Every single one of those points applies very well to the religious, although certainly not only to the religious, and the religious will never watch this video and realize the truth. Because the truth isn't emotionally comforting, and that's all religion runs on. It's all a lot of modern political thought runs on. Feelings, fifis, emotions, and that's dumb. Fuck your feelings. They have a time and a place, and that's not all the time and in every place. Yet far too many people simply cannot deal with that fact. And that's one of the reasons that society is so generally screwed right now, because people are too dumb to deal with reality. I trust I don't have to say it, but come on, you know I will. It's all just pathetically sad.
Everything is